Hi, Long Beach Post audience. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Long Beach Post live chat series. I'm Mike Gardabasio here for the Post, and happy to be joined by incoming LBUSD Superintendent Jill Baker, who I believe I only need to say incoming for like 48 more hours. Is that right?
That's right.
So thanks so much to Jill for coming on to join us. These education live chats, I think, are really popular, and I know giving a lot of good information out to people. I'm going to give the usual disclaimers. Go ahead and ask your questions on Facebook and Twitter, and those are going to get filtered over to me. But I'm also just going to be honest up front that I'm looking at something like 160 questions already. Jill is going to be here for a half hour, so go ahead and continue to ask your questions. But we've gotten quite a few already, which I think will kind of guide this conversation. And please stay tuned at 3 p.m. The Post will be going live with the city's coronavirus briefing, which are also always very educational. So Jill, thanks for joining us. First of all, we're right about exactly 1 month until school starts. We know that the first month of school will be online only. You guys have started rolling out some of the information about what that will look like, including that this will be graded, and there will be some other changes from the spring. But there's also still quite a few questions up in the air in terms of what the day will look like for the students and parents and teachers. So with 1 month out, can you just give us a sense of what the timeline will be, roughly when you're anticipating making the announcements about all of these sort of details as we get closer to September 1st?
Sure. Thanks for having me this afternoon. It's always great to engage with the public and you in particular, Mike. So in the days ahead, starting Monday, we will start to release what will become a daily message and video that gives descriptions of things that we're working on and readies families and teachers for coming back to school in some form. We're going to start next week with a lot of information about health and safety. As you know, we've had thousands of employees continuing to work during the pandemic, even from the time that we closed schools on March 13th. Lots of staff out and about, readying buildings for whenever we can come back. And so that health and safety information, we want folks to really know what has gone on in these months that has been just, constant work. We did release yesterday some information around schedules. What does an instructional day look like in this environment? That's very different than what went on in the spring. And so much more like a school-oriented schedule. And we're working out the final details with TALB and our teachers right now, but much more like a school day. So after that health and safety information, we're going to head into lots of training for staff with a focus on teachers. And getting them ready to feel confident and comfortable in working with our students as they come back.
Yeah, one question that we've gotten from several people is around the subject of training. What kind of training? My understanding is you guys are still sort of selecting the platform that people will be logging on to, right? Once that's been selected, what kind of training will be available for teachers, but also what kind of training will be available for parents and students who also may not, be up on how to do all this stuff?
Yeah. Well, as I know you've heard and others have already heard, we are in the final stage, which will culminate on next week's board meeting on August 5th with a contract for what's called a learning management system. And just to simplify that, it's a single sign-on system where students, teachers, and families sign on for all of the tools of the trade, so to speak, from classrooms. It has apps in it, it has Google in it, but it simplifies the way that we interact around instruction. It also takes attendance and holds teachers' grade books. So we hope for that to be a very different experience for staff as well as for families. It's not the best timing to have to do that because it's new, but we've made a huge commitment and we've had staff working all summer as they've seen the couple of tools or the learning management systems that we're looking at, preparing to offer up 5 days of training that will include a significant amount of training on that learning management system so that the first day of school, teachers have at least enough tools to get started and use during that first month of school. Other training, do you want me to comment on other training or hold back?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got other things coming for counselors and teachers around social emotional learning with really a focus on care, what students have experienced before since school closed, is significant, and many of them are really in suffering situations. And so we want our teachers to have the tools that they need to start the year. When their students left on March 13th, they had the benefit of many months of contact with their students and knowing them. This is going to be very different. The relationship has to be built between teachers and students across a computer. And it's a very different approach. So in addition to that, lots of opportunities for teachers and other staff to learn about different kinds of online instruction in education, synchronous, asynchronous, and how to combine those during a school day.
I think that's so. The number one question I saw out there was the training that'll be available to people. The number two question was, what does the school day look like, right? The teachers, I think, all want to know, are they going to be teaching from their classroom, and how much of that, when Jill says synchronous, what she means is class starts at 8 a.m. and it goes till 9:30. Is the teacher logged on from 8 to 9:30, and is the whole class logged on from 8 to 9:30, or is there a 1 hour and 30-minute curriculum that could be done throughout the day? So I guess that's my next question is, um, where are you guys in that process? What are you thinking right now across the different age groups for synchronous learning? How much of that will be live instruction?
Yeah, we've had lots of teacher input and staff working on how to design those days in an age appropriate way. And so it's not one or the other. In many cases, it is that the teacher will do a direct instruction lesson or will queue up a video that teaches a specific skill that he or she is working on with their students. And then there's typically a pause point where students may do an assignment. A teacher across this platform is able to pull a small group of students to check their work. So it is more of an attempt to try to emulate what a classroom experience is than just assigning out or teaching a lesson and then going offline. The schedules that we're looking at have lunch periods built in because we'll intend to serve meals on campuses so that students can leave at a designated time. Teachers will have their break at a designated time, and that they can, if they get their meal at school, they'll go get their meal at school and come back to their classroom setting.
So there's a lot of negotiation still going on around it, but the basic answer for the people asking those questions are, for both teachers and students, and thus for parents, it will be much more anchored to the schedule of a regular school day than obviously what happened in the spring. One question we've gotten from a few different people is, obviously asking a 17-year-old to log on and do 11th grade classwork from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. is very different from asking a first or a second grader to do that, where at least when we plop our kids in front of Disney Plus all day, the warning comes up every now and then that we're not supposed to be putting them in front of the screen all day, right? What are your thoughts on that? How much do you break out elementary school students as their own group? And we've gotten a few questions that, I know there's a waiver that the governor's order potentially allows for in-person elementary school stuff. Is that something you guys are considering pursuing? And if not, how different will the online model be for those kids?
Yeah, so our instructional supports are with age specificity in mind. So you may have a kindergarten teacher that builds in a lot of movement. Students can get up behind their screen, they can move around and respond in ways that maybe older students don't need to. Our team behind the scenes has built in ways of integrating social emotional skill building, resilience, and other things into their academic lessons. And so what students and teachers and families will experience is very different than leaving a classroom in March, taking all of the existing materials and then trying to teach through a pandemic. It will be inclusive of different aspects of what it means to learn across a computer. And I see it as very age specific, the way it's being prepared.
So, I wanted to ask, obviously this pandemic has affected people across the socioeconomic strata in very different ways. Quite a few, obviously, of your students' parents are out of work, or their families are going through struggles that are, more severe than other families in the city. How do you attempts to engage with that in terms of leadership? I know that there's like low cost internet options available. You guys obviously did a Chromebook distribution. But we've gotten questions from people that are saying the low cost internet doesn't work very well. They've got 3 kids at home, and maybe the parents are both going to be out working. Um, what can you guys do to try and help sort of close that access to the online world, which, as we know, separate from the pandemic, was already that gap presenting real problems in the city?
Yeah. Well, we made a purchase in the spring of about 7,000 hotspots, and we have not exhausted that number. And so we will bring those back out to offer to families through their school buildings. We also ordered a significant number of Chromebooks so that students who don't have Chromebooks, if they didn't check one out in the spring, or if they still need one, we've continued to give Chromebooks out during summer. We had many students participating in intervention programs at a distance, but that checked out a Chromebook in summer. So I think we really do have what we need. It's the challenge for us is always getting the materials into the hands of families. And as I've said previously, the good thing about the hotspots that we purchased, they are short-term hotspots that can be extended. So if students have to stay at a distance longer than what we're planning, they can be extended. They also offer a family 10 devices that can go onto one hotspot. So that doesn't solve the larger problem, but it does solve some of the immediate problem. I guess stepping back a couple steps, we are supportive of legislation that is trying to close the digital divide, working with the city in any way that we can, and just trying to push for resources that don't require that individual districts or individual cities solve this problem, because it really is an issue, especially in low-income communities.
You mentioned coming together with the city, and you and I have talked about this on a number of different issues. I think sort of there's 500,000 people in Long Beach and probably 500,000 visions of the silver bullet that would fix all of the problems around education. One question that's come up quite a bit is, are there really out of the box things that the district is looking at, things like outdoor schooling or school meetings at parks? Are there things like that that you guys are looking at that would really maybe be very different from what you've done traditionally, but that could, as we know, the spread of the virus is limited outside, right? That could sort of work better in the current environment?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at a lot of different possibilities in the city for use of property that's not our own. Many times we're met with challenges, even if the idea sounds good, when you really get down to how would you staff a space that's different than a school, who would supervise, how would students get there? The challenges outweigh, unfortunately, some of the creativity of the solutions. That's true also because we do have funds that are helping us to move forward in this time and prepare for the start of school, but we have to be mindful. We can't double our staff at this time because of the fiscal environment. So we have definitely explored with partners, university, Long Beach City College. We're thinking that the childcare situation for us involves the city. And so I'm not sure how creative we've gotten. We also have a lot of requirements as a school district in terms of what is safe for students and what we're able to do in terms of safety. We don't have a lot of flexibility in that way.
So you're saying you can't just send out a mass text to a 5th grade class that says, meet at the park on Friday.
That's right. That's right. We do anticipate that at the point where we can bring students back into a school building, we will certainly use every playground space that we can as an option, because we know that those are safe. But I don't think that's the creativity that you're quite talking about.
Well, I mean, I do think that's, you drive around Long Beach, you don't usually see kids doing their class outside, right? I mean, so even doing what you're describing, I think is pretty creative. One question that has come up quite a bit, which sort of relates, I think, to what I was asking about with the digital divide is, I mean, it's the law. Like all all school age kids are in school, right? And not every family. It's not the law that kids' parents can be home with them to do these online learning models. So, what do you do for the parents of the kindergartner, the parents of the 3rd grader, who both parents have to work all day and they're not comfortable leaving their child at home? Are you going to have those on-campus options, childcare options, and how are they going to be trained to facilitate potentially 30 kids who are doing 30 different 2nd grade curriculums or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a continuing challenge for us. What I can say is that we are working with all of our partner organizations. So we have a kids club that is one of the district child care programs. For preschool students, we have Head Start and child development centers. We are working with all of our WRAP after school providers because they have been given authorization to operate not just as after school programs, but during the day programs. And so that may be an option for some families. We're also focusing on employees who are coming back to work and providing childcare across the city in a safe environment. We've had a lot of experience since March of having students in a childcare setting at a distance with lots of precautions in place. It's one of the things we'll feature on video next week. So those who haven't had a chance to really see what that looks like, they may be comforted by seeing what that actually looks like in action.
Um, you've mentioned, and I've mentioned a couple of times, you guys are still in negotiations on some of these specifics with TALB, and the teachers union in Long Beach. One thing that I've seen from the district is that there's an expectation that the teachers are going to be teaching from the classroom. And I've seen some messages posted on social media from the teachers union that seem to, push back on that and signify that that's not something that they feel is settled. Number one, why is it, obviously a priority of your guys is to get teachers into the classroom? What's the benefit of that? And number two, for parents who are curious, we have gotten that question a few times on Facebook. Where are those negotiations, or what does that look like right now?
Yeah, it's actually just two separate things going on, I guess. We are absolutely at the table collaborating and negotiating with TAL actively. So technically, work location is not something that's bargained. And so our announcement last week that we're right now having teachers come back to their classrooms really centers on our thinking around students. And with all of the health and safety precautions put in place, again, we've had staff working for the last months getting classrooms and schools ready. Our focus has really been on students from like an excellence and equity standpoint. So ensuring that not just an individual classroom or a teacher who has high expertise can teach, but that every teacher is able to deliver a quality learning experience that's consistent across schools. It's actually one of the hallmarks of our district is having that consistency across schools and not having individual classrooms or individual schools that are great, but having a system of schools that's great. That is dependent on the quality of instruction in every classroom. And so our focus in making that decision has been on ensuring excellence and equity across every classroom in the school district for every student.
Um, Another question that we've gotten quite a bit on Facebook is about special education students. Similar to what we were talking about with elementary school kids whose parents might not be able to be home with them. Obviously, in the special education side of things in the district, a lot of those services are not cannot be performed digitally, right? So, what are the plans regarding kids with IEPs and special education students for how you guys can work through that side of it?
Yeah. So our team has been very focused on figuring out what can be provided in a digital environment, and then what can safely be provided with precautions when students come back to a building. And I'll say that they have actively engaged teachers and parents and paraprofessionals in the district to try to think that through. We do have a lot of staff that associate beyond a teacher that associate with special education services, who we anticipate being very active in outreach to families and communicating with families at a distance and providing whatever supports that we can for students, even while we're in that distance learning. I can honestly say that things will be better than they were in the spring. We've had some time, we've had a lot of input, both constructive and positive, that has helped us to really think about how we can be better in the special education environment.
So I think what I'm hearing is a consistent theme over the last 20 minutes. And again, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Jill Baker, the incoming superintendent for the LBUSD. We are really backlogged on questions, but you can continue to ask away on Facebook and Twitter. The theme I've heard over the last 20 minutes is this is going to be online at least until October 4th or 5th, right, that you guys have set, but that everything you're pushing towards is a more digital version of a quote unquote regular school day in terms of grading and rigor and all this other stuff. Just as a leader who's been in the school district for quite some time and is about to take over, what do you think is not replicatable online? I mean, what in your eyes is just sort of lost, that we're not going to have in this city until such a time as that, students and teachers can be back on campus together?
Yeah, well, I will just start off by saying there is nothing that replaces, in my mind, in K-12 education, there's nothing that replaces a great classroom and a great school. So everything we're doing is with that in mind. This is plan B, plan C, plan D off of what I think of as what schools and classrooms represent for us. So what are we missing? We're missing the sense of community that a school represents, because going classrooms across a computer doesn't do justice to that sense of community that is family oriented, that is student centered, that involves, the local, everything about a local community. I think if we're honest, nothing replaces the actual in-person interaction between teachers and students. That magic that happens in a classroom where a teacher can scan the room, they can see the eyes of their students, they can monitor and walk around and listen to groups. And we're missing the opportunity for the kind of collaboration that exists when kids can sit knee to knee, they can argue a point, they can debate. So it's just a very different feel when you're trying to do that all via Zoom or a different platform.
Yeah, for sure. You guys had announced, as I mentioned, that early October date for sort of it's basically the first month that you guys have sort of guaranteed will be online. The governor, I think just a few days after you guys had put that out, released the standards for what will be expected, which include sort of declining test cases, positivities in a county. This has come up outside of the school district a number of times, but how much is Long Beach being tied to LA County as a whole, or to what extent is the fact that we have our own health department going to allow the LBUSD flexibility to potentially come back before the LAUSD or the rest of LA County?
Well, so the watch list is a state watch list, and to get off of that watch, which is monitored by county. So we are absolutely connected to LA County specific to that watch list. There are some significant metrics in the watch list that are required to have happen before we can come off of that watch list. So we are very much connected to LA County. Dr. Davis absolutely supports our day-to-day decision making right now. There are nuances and decisions to make between bringing everybody back and operating to some degree that she's extremely helpful in. She has advised our local preparation for classrooms, for sanitization, and other really local aspects. And she helps us make a decision when we've had a COVID case of an employee or other person who's coming in contact with our employees. So it's all kind of part and parcel of the decision, but we are linked on the state list to LA County.
With that being said, the numbers for LA County have been really challenging, obviously, for the last month or so, especially. What hope do you have that you'll even be able to evaluate a return at that early October date, or to what extent are you guys looking at this as a semester or multiple months online decision?
Yeah, well, I'm going to absolutely keep the hope. I think that's important for all of us. I will say that what I've seen the last week and people really buckling down in terms of what they're supposed to do in terms of wearing a face cover, taking precautions, it makes me sad that we are at this moment where we are because the public, didn't really do what they were supposed to do over time, and now our students are going to suffer because of it. So I'm hopeful that with the recent statements and what has been required of people that they'll take it seriously, so we have the best potential to get back to school as soon as we can. So I am keeping the hope, but I'm also a realist. When you run an organization that's the biggest employer in the city, that involves 70,000 plus students, you also have to be a realist, and taking all of that data into consideration, is our job. and we'll make a decision as early as possible with what we have in mind so that people aren't just waiting until the last minute.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is, I mean, is there a target date for you guys where you're going, if the numbers are at blank threshold on blank date, we're going to say we're online through the end of November or December, or what are the parameters you guys are looking at for making those evaluations?
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking at it in weekly increments, but we have to be off the watch list. There are several metrics. One of them is stable cases for 14 days. And so if we don't see that coming, then we're probably going to be able to make a decision several weeks before the October 5th date.
Right. Okay. Um, what first of all, is you're preparing to officially become the superintendent. What are your thoughts on the state of the school district? I mean, I feel like there's such a great history in the LBUSD, of achievement by students, of great teachers and a great school district. And this just seems like a time where, in my lifetime at least, of being here for 36 years, I can't remember seeing so much tension between parents and teachers in the school district, and probably students and parents. I know, at least in my house. What are your feelings on the state of things, and how do you, as the leader of the school district, who's sort of in the middle of all that, how do you try and kind of bring everyone forward in the same direction when everyone does want to pull in different directions?
It's a great question. I mean, it's a day-to-day challenge. It is a very difficult time to take over an organization. But what I know about LBUSD from being a 28-year employee in this district is that we are an organization of resilience. We haven't faced this kind of pandemic, and in many cases, like a pandemic inside of a pandemic inside of a pandemic. And this is multi-layered. But in fact, I have a piece on my wall that's called "After the Storm" that was painted by an artist who I followed for a long time, and it's an image of people looking past the storm. And I look at it every day, and I think the best that we can do is we can be unified in supporting one another. We can absorb some of the emotion of this time. We can literally be kind. We can encourage one another. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way. I mean, it's what we can offer to each other as humans. Everyone is going through something, whether you've worked tirelessly during this or whether you've been off work. We really have to lean into our humanity as a point of connection during this time, and give each other some grace, and know that we're all trying our best, and it is a time that none of us have experienced. I've said over and over, one of the things that's so difficult about this time is usually when we're going through something that's hard, you can kind of see the arc of it, and you know that there's an end in mind. Something that is very hard for our psyches is that we can't see the end of this. We're just riding on the top of an arc, waiting for it to change. And so that's hard.
Yeah, I'll co-sign with that, with that sentiment. One last question: you and I had referenced the materials that went out to teachers talking about what the structure of the school day would be. Is that available publicly yet, or is that going to be available soon? Next week, we had several readers ask the comment about where they can find the sort of documents and videos that we were referring to.
Yeah, that will be put out publicly. And I'll also encourage our community on August 5th. Our district staff will be doing another update for the Board of Education on opening of school with some details about instructional programs. We'll also cover the learning management system, and know that's the system that people are going to sign on to for education. And so there's going to be a huge ramp up of our communications in the next several weeks. We'll also be asking families on a survey to tell us at the point where if we can come back to school at some point. We're going to be asking pretty soon about parents' interest in what kind of learning they would want their students to come back to if we have that option.
Okay, well, I think that was quite a few of the specific questions we had answered, as well as I think some good general information. For those who want more information, as Dr. Baker just said, August 5th next week, the Long Beach Unified School District's Board of Education meetings do stream live on their YouTube. I will also be tweeting information out and covering that live for the Long Beach Post. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in. We had a very big audience today and quite a few questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. But do stay tuned for more information. And Jill, thanks so much for joining us. And stay tuned for 3 p.m. The Long Beach Post will be going live with the city's coronavirus briefing.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everyone.